Hello everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to Torah L'chaim, our weekly meeting to study the weekly parsha, the Torah portion. So it's so nice to see so many of you already connected. Let me see who is here. I'm Paro Goldman. Boker Tov and welcome. I'm gonna show here I like all the icons that you use there. Very nice. Karen Farkas is here. Welcome. Priscilla Kerr is here. Good to see you, Priscilla. How is everything going? How is everything going? If you want to share it, would like to see. I would like to know. It's good to see you too. CJ Rosenfeld. Welcome. Good afternoon. Is that Ruben? Is that you? Yeah. Holly is here. Welcome to the class. That's great. Yes, CJ Rosenfeld, you're Ruben. I remember today. Priscilla, I see you making progress. We are all praying. We are all praying here, sending you good vibes. And we are going to study today about Parsha Tetzaveh, which is it's very interesting. It's very interesting. We're going to see a few interesting things about this Parsha, and has something very peculiar. Something that no other parsha has, at least not in this first 4 books. Actually, 3 books. You're going to see in a minute why I'm saying this. Andrea is here. Welcome. Welcome, Andrea. Bienvenida. And I said, we are going to start Parsha Tetzaveh. And there is something very unique about this parsha, and we are going to start in a minute discussing that. And it's the fact that the name of Moses does not appear at all in this parsha. Do you know that? Do you know that the name of Moses is not part of this parsha? It's not that God is not talking to Moses, but instead of calling Moses by name, God is saying you. It's very interesting. So, of course, the name of Moses is not present in the book of Genesis, right? It's basically that's before Moses was born. And the last book, the book of Deuteronomy, well, also there are some parts that does not contain the name of Moses because it was written by Moses. So it's a different kind of thing. But other than that, the name of Moses appears in every single parsha on the book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, the book of Numbers, except for this one, Parsha Tetzaveh, which is from the book of Exodus. And we are going to see that actually opened the door to lots of speculation from the rabbis. Why in this world the name of Moses is not part of this parsha? And you're going to be surprised of some of the reasons why the rabbis say the name of Moses is not here. We're going to get a little Kabbalistic at the beginning of the class to try to uncover and to answer that question. Why the name of Moses is not part of this parsha? Okay. So we are ready to begin. I have to move one thing here. Just give me a second. Dismiss all. Very good. We are going to move into the text that I have for today. And the first thing I wanted to read for you is the very beginning of the parsha. Nothing to do with the fact that the name of Moses is not here, but I want to just show you how the Parsha begins. And you know what? It's a mistake here. This should be, I just realized, 20. There you go. No mistake. Jerome Fomin is here. Welcome, Jerome. Good to see you in the class. Good afternoon to you. So, Parsha Tetzaveh. Start with saying, Ve'ata Tetzaveh, and you shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of crushed olives for lighting, for the eternal light. Okay, so that's the beginning of the Parsha. It's talking about this kind of fuel that the Israelites have to bring in order to keep that flame burning all the time in the tabernacle. Okay? But you can see here that in the normal circumstances, the Parsha will start with the words, Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, or something like that. And God said to Moses. But in this case, the name of Moses is not explicit. It just says, Ve'ata, and you shall instruct. But why is the name of Moses missing? Any idea? Any of you? Any guesses why the name of Moses is missing from this Parsha? I'll give you a minute to think about it. If you don't know, please let me know. I don't know. Okay. I will give you a few more seconds to see if somebody wants to try to guess why the name of Moses is not present in this Parsha. And then I will show you what I learned from this. Ruben, you said it's not limited by time. Okay. Okay, so it could be for an instruction for everybody, not just for Moses. Is that what you mean? But as I mentioned, there is a very Kabbalistic motive or reason that the rabbis give. And let's start with that process so we can understand. The Baal HaTurim, this famous rabbi from Germany, he said, Tetzaveh is the only parsha in the Torah since Moses' birth in which Moses' name does not appear. Okay? With the exception of the book of Deuteronomy, as I mentioned before, which consists mostly of a first-person narrative spoken by Moses. The reason for this, listen to this. The reason for this is that when the people of Israel sinned with the golden calf, which, by the way, historically, it hasn't happened yet. Okay? But listen what happened. When the people of Israel sinned with the golden calf, Moses said to God, if you do not forgive them, erase me from the book that you have written. So in other words, if you're not going to forgive them, erase them from the Torah. Okay? This was realized in the Parsha Tetzaveh. Okay, so basically, in other words, I will talk about that in a minute. In the Parsha Tetzaveh, so in this week Parsha, since the censure of a righteous person, even if made conditional on an unfulfilled stipulation, always has some effect. So in other words, what God is saying here, or what we are learning, is be very careful of what you wish for. Be very careful, because it may come to happen. So in other words, God ended up forgiving the Jewish people after the golden calf. Okay? There was a little purge there, but in general, the people of Israel was forgiven. But nevertheless, God erased Moses' name from one parsha because of that kind of weird request. If you don't want to forgive them, erase me from the Torah. And God said, okay, I'm going to forgive them, but I'm going to erase your name from one parsha. Hello, Clyde. Welcome from the mountain top. Which mountain? Let us know. We are all curious. Want to know which mountain. Okay, so this is very interesting. Very interesting reason of why the name of Moses is not part of this parsha. But there is more. There is more about this. Because why parsha Tetzaveh? God wanted to erase Moses from one parsha. But why Tetzaveh? So, listen to this. Let's pick up with Exodus 32:32. You know, it says here, if you do not forgive them, erase me from the book that you have written. Let's take that verse. Let me isolate it for you. Okay? Jerome, you said, was the erasure a punishment for asking for forgiveness? No, it was not a punishment. It was because Moses said, erase me from the book. Erase me from the book. So God said, okay, I will erase you from the book. Even though God forgave the Jewish people because of that kind of request that Moses said, erase me from the book, he was erased from the book. Not from the entire Torah, but from one parsha. But then here is when Kabbalah or Jewish mysticism comes to be. Why from Tetzaveh? Why wouldn't God erase the name of Moses from a different book? Why from this one? Why from this parsha? And this is what it started getting amazing. The verse says, let me read it again. Now if you will forgive their sin, well and good. But if not, erase me from the record which you have written. A little bit I just realized I used a different translation here. But look at the way it's written in Hebrew. When Moses asks, erase me from the book, it says, you see here, I put it, misifrecha. Mecheni na misifrecha, from your book. So basically, in other words, misifrecha, mi means from. Sefer, we all know the word sefer, is book. Ha means yours in Hebrew. So from your book. But the rabbis now read the word misifrecha in a different way. They read it as mi, sefer, ha. And you see, I put it here for your convenience. Every Hebrew letter has a value. Right? So mi sefer ha means from, because look at the bottom. Look at the bottom here. You will have the number 20 is the letter Chaf, right? Chaf value is 20. So mi sefer ha could be read from the 20th book. So you said, what is this rabbi talking about? What does the 20th book has to do with this parsha? Well, guess which one is the 20th parsha? Look at that list. Which one is the 20th parsha? Tetzaveh, which is this parsha. Isn't that crazy? Moses says, if you don't forgive them, erase me from the 20th parsha, which is Tetzaveh. These are the 52 parshiot of the year, and the 20th is Tetzaveh. And this is the name, this is the parsha with the name of Moses is not present. What an amazing midrash, right? Give me shivers when I read something like that. Come on. Come on, I want to know what you feel when you read stuff like this. That Moses says, yeah, I love this commentary. I love this commentary. Okay? But beyond this technicality of why it was the 20th parsha, because it's misifrecha, there is more. And I wanted to share another teaching about the gematria. Gematria strikes again, says Jerome Fomin. Let me highlight it. Let me highlight it here. It says gematria strikes again. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So another teaching about this, and this is from the Lubavitcher Rabbi, and he said something very interesting. He said, While Moses' name does not appear in the Parsha of Tetzaveh, Moses himself is very much present. The entire Parsha consists of God's words to Moses. Okay, so this is very interesting. Because sometimes we say, yeah, the name of Moses is not there. Yeah, but is Moses there? Is Moses present? Of course Moses is present. Just the name is not present. But here the Rabbi says, indeed, the Parsha first word is ve'ata, and you. The you being the person of Moses. Indeed, the words you connote a subject's very self. Well, a person's name is a more superficial handle of his personality. We are going to talk in a minute of why I'm saying this, or why he says this. This means that Moses is more present in this Parsha, that is present in a deeper, more essential way than any mention of his name could possibly express. This is fully in keeping with the Baal HaTurim explanation. Remember the one we read before? Because Moses was prepared to forego mention of his name in the Torah for the sake of his people, he merited that his quintessential self, the level of self that cannot be captured by any name of designation, be externalized by the Torah. It is this level of Moses' self that is expressed by his nameless presence in the Parsha of Tetzaveh. Why is this so deep? Well, because we kind of learn this principle whenever we talk, for example, about God. And we realize that sometimes we use different names for God because one name cannot describe in full the whole presence of God. So in other words, names come with limits attached. Names or any other label, if you wish, what they do is to limit. So to call this individual Moses, according to the Rabbi, it already implies limitations. It's like a label. A name is a label. So a name, yeah, it helps us recognize a person, but it comes with limitations. In this case, for example, you will remember, why was Moses named Moses? Because it implies that he was rescued from the sea. That's what the name implies. So the name is focusing only in one aspect of Moses' life, but not in others. So in the fact that this Parsha, we have Moses, but we don't read his name, it will allow us to appreciate the person of Moses without any limitations. And this is a great thing. This is a great thing. We usually take it the opposite, like the name is, naming something is better than not naming something. In the world of Kabbalah, it's all the opposite. In the world of Kabbalah, names limit things, situations, God, you name it. Everything that has a name is immediately limited, but that label. Really, really beautiful teaching. So, with that in mind, I would like to move now into a few things for this Parsha. We already know, yes, the name of Moses is not there, but what is the Parsha really talking about? Well, there are a few things. It's talking about the fuel for the lamps. It's talking about the clothing for the priests and all the details of the ornamentations that they will have to have. And this is something very interesting because according to the Torah, what you wear is very important. And this is something that we experience it every day, even if we don't realize that, how the way people are dressed, they also usually say something about the person wearing those clothes, right? That sometimes we know, or we think we know, many things about people's life depends on the way they dress up. Has it ever happened to you? That in some cases, it's more evident than others, especially when you have to wear a uniform, for example. Let's say that you're a police officer. Well, the uniform that you wear, you will already say a lot about who you are. People recognize police officers for the way, for what they wear. And if they show up, it's almost like your behavior changes because of what the other person is wearing. Same thing happens when, that's why like a judge will wear special robes, or doctors or nurses or firefighters. They have this kind of clothing that it has a lot to say about what they do or what they represent. And sometimes clothing have the power to change our mindset. Let's say, for example, that you're inviting to a wedding, fancy wedding. You're at home and you put on the tuxedo or a fancy dress. You look at yourself at the mirror. How do you feel? You feel already like you are in the wedding, in the celebration. But actually, are you? No, you're not. You're still at home. You're still at home. But just by looking at yourself wearing special clothing, it will put you in a different mood. So that's why, for example, on Shabbat, the rabbi said that we have to use different kind of clothing just for Shabbat. Because whatever we wear contributes to the mood, to change the mood from the weekdays to the Shabbat. So in this case, it's kind of the same thing. Part of this parsha is all about the details of the clothing for the priest, in the hope that when the people of Israel would look at the priests and they were wearing this special clothing, they will feel something special. And also for the priest, when they look at themselves wearing those special clothing, they will realize the kind of job, the kind of task that they have. And there is something sacred. That's why so many special things are described in this parsha. Karen Farkas, what do you say here? Let me see. You say also the bride's dress, which leads to the saying that all brides are beautiful. Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. It's a perfect example of how a dress can change everybody's mood, right? As soon as the bride walks into a sanctuary, everybody, something changes inside. So the spirit of the parsha, for many of it's just like that. So it described all these ornamentations that they were designed to create some kind of mood within the people of Israel in the context of the worship in the temple. Okay, I believe it's easy to understand. But before that, it goes. It's, as I mentioned, starts with the fuel for the lamps. Okay, so let me bring back this verse plus another one so we can talk about it. Exodus 27 verses 20 and 21. Let me read it again. Ve'ata Tetzaveh. You shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of crushed olives for lighting, for the eternal light. Okay? And then he continues, Aaron and his sons shall set them up in the tent of meeting, outside the curtains, which is over the ark of the covenant, to burn from evening to morning before the Lord. It shall be a dew from the Israelites for all time throughout the ages. And that's why basically we have now the eternal light in all the synagogues. I don't know if you ever noticed that. If you never noticed that, next time you have a chance to go to a synagogue, usually look at the front of the synagogue over the ark, and you will see that is always a light bulb is on 24/7, and this is coming from this parsha. Back in the day, they needed to have this fire burning all the time in the sanctuary. Then it was in the temple. And because we don't have the temple anymore, we do it in the synagogue. Because this parsha said, it shall be a dew from the Israelites for all time throughout the ages. And that's why, at least symbolically, we still do it. Okay? But there is something very interesting here. And is that there are some rabbis that seems to find some kind of contradiction in the wording of verse 20 and verse 21. The fact that, for example, in verse 20 at the very end, we'll say, for the eternal light. Try to imagine the concept of something that is eternal. And something that is eternal, it implies that it's never changing. It stays like that forever. And that was the whole idea, to have this light always the same forever. But verse 21, it will say to burn from evening to morning before the Lord. Why did it have to add this kind of these words are unnecessary to say evening to morning. We already said that it's forever. Why the extra words from evening to morning? Believe me, they are unnecessary to understand what the Torah wants for us. Okay, so that picked the rabbis' imaginations. They wanted to try to understand God's will and why we'll use this kind of language. And I found a very interesting comment. Again, I will bring back for you the Lubavitcher Rebbe that wrote something beautiful about these two verses. And he says, these verses contain a paradox. Eternal light implies a state of perpetuality and changelessness. From evening to morning implies fluctuating conditions of lesser and greater luminance. You realize that night is dark, morning is bright. So here the Rebbe is playing with the images we have, even if we are not aware of that. The images that the words are bringing to our minds. So what kind of image you have when you read the word eternal light, right? Now, what kind of image you have when you say evening? Think about life. What evening represents, what morning represents. Three different images that we get. Clyde, you said no need to burn during the day. No, they were burning all the time. It was eternal. All the time. Morning and evening will be burning all the time, these lights. Okay? So, but let's continue with the Rebbe. He said, so again, he said eternal, said perpetuality, and changeless. Now, from evening to morning implies fluctuating conditions of lesser and greater luminance. For such is our mission in life, to impart the eternity and perfection of the divine, that it means the eternal light, right? That's what represents eternal light, the eternity and perfection of the divine to a temporal world. And to do so not by annihilating or overwhelming the world's temporality and diversity, but by illuminating its very state and condition from evening to morning with the divine light. It means that the goal is not to make evening and morning disappear, and now it's called, you have only one long morning. That's not the idea. The idea is that this eternal light will be always there to illuminate, even if we are going, so to speak, through an evening phase, dark phase, but also if you are going through a morning phase. Maybe you're starting something new. Maybe you're in a good mood. But always with the eternal light of God shining in your life, being part of your experience. So whatever you're going through in life, the idea is always to perceive or to share, sometimes to share with others that eternal light of God, which is very interesting. And these are things that sometimes happen in life, that we go through different things. And I will say that sometimes it's easy to find the light of God when we are going through a morning, but not so easy when we are going through an evening moment in our lives. And we all know when we are talking about, when we go through some dark moments of our life, when we are going through challenges. How do you find the light of God when you go through challenges, through difficulties? How do we do it? Well, that is the thing to understand first, because I believe everything starts with an understanding. When you understand, when you reflect, then you have a better chances to make it happen. So is the first start with the understanding that eternal light it's always there, but we have to find it, to find that light even when we are going through moments of evenings in our lives. Which brings me to the first part of the verse, because it's interesting the way the Torah is commanding Moses to explain how that fuel, how that oil has to be produced. In order to create this eternal light, in order to create this beautiful and bright light, it says that it has to come from crushed olives. Remember that? Let me bring it back here for you. He said, "You shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of crushed olives for lighting." Why will the verse say that the olives have to be crushed in order to bring this pure oil for the light, for the lamps? Well, again, the Talmud will say here, just as the olive yields light only when it's squeezed, so are man's greatest potentials realized only under the pressure of adversity. Wow. This is an amazing teaching. Amazing teaching. In the sense that sometimes when we go through difficulties, when we go through those things in life that you feel that circumstances are crushing you, well, what it's doing is for you to give even a brighter light to the world. By overcoming those situations, we have the potential to be able to give even brighter light to the world. That's what it says. Andrea, what do you say here? Let me read. It's in the message. It is important to do our personal work during the good times. That way the bad times are easier to handle. The light is equally important day or night. Yes, beautiful message. Thank you for sharing. Absolutely. Yes. So this is a beautiful teaching. I think we can all use this. Sometimes we forget. And this is something I'm going to talk more about this for the Devar in the Car. This is Devar in the Car coming this week. You will find it in our YouTube and Facebook channels on Friday. But I'm talking exactly about this. The image of the crushed olives giving the purest light. And it's the same image of ourselves, overcoming difficult circumstances. And what I learned is sometimes, what we perceive to be a stumbling block sometimes could become a stepping tool, something to, instead of making you fall, it has the potential to bring you higher if you step on top of it instead of stumbling with it. This thing. Let's see, Holly, what do you say here? Let me read it. I said, the light in the night offers safety and security. The light in the day provides some illumination and the promise of continuity of divine care. Yeah, and absolutely. Yeah, Andrew, you agree? Okay. Thank you. That's wonderful. So, and there is one more thing that I found this beautiful Hasidic teaching. Yeah, Reuven, you say perspective, things happening for us and not to us. But you see, it's all part of the way we look at things. The way we look at things. If you look at life and you said things are happening to you, that's a stumbling block. If you can actually see, you see, again, the image of the light. In order to see, you need light. Right? If you can see life as something that's happening for you, then instead of a stumbling block, it becomes a stepping stool. It takes time and it's not easy. But it's part of our commitment, our relationship with God, and especially with the wisdom of Torah. That is, I believe the wisdom of Torah is what helps us to see life in a different way. Karen, you said they will have it no outside light in the Holy of Holies, so the eternal light will have been needed. No, they did have windows. They did have windows, by the way, inside the temple. They weren't huge, but they did have these little windows. So it was more of a symbolic. It was more of a symbolic image. In fact, the window supposed to the idea was this eternal light representing the light of God shining to the entire world. That's why the windows. In other words, the windows of the temple weren't there to capture the outside light, but to send to the world the inside light. At least that's the way the rabbis presented, which I find it fascinating, that concept. Okay? The other thing that I learned from this Hasidic teaching, that it says, when was, listen to this again, another explanation of beaten olives for lighting. It says, when one speak crushing words of rebuke, it must be with the sole purpose of enlightening, illuminating and uplifting one's fellow, never, God forbid, to humiliate and break him. In other words, every time that there is a, so to speak, beaten, or something has to be broken or squeezed, it should be always in order to get light. If everything that you do, sometimes you have to do things that they are harsh, but if the motivation is not to bring light, don't do anything. Don't do anything. So, Jerome, you said positive criticism. Yeah, I know. Karen Farkas, you said before that you were talking about in the inner chamber. No, the inner chamber, which is where the ark was. No, that was only for Moses. There was nothing. Nobody could see that from the outside. It was just a step outside that, and that room did have windows to the rest of the world. Yes. Jerome, you say positive criticism. Yeah, you know what? Technically, when the Torah or the Talmud is talking about that, they use the word rebuke, for example. Or, there is another word. I was just studying this with one of my bat mitzvah students. Admonition. That's the other words that is used in the Torah, the words of admonition. Or tochecha in Hebrew. In these days, hi Keredwen, welcome. In these days we have the word, I think we use like feedback. We don't rebuke people, we don't give them admonition, we just give them positive feedback. Right, Jerome? Not even criticism. Criticism is a bad word. It's feedback, but it's the same thing. We all know what we're talking about. It's funny because we try to sugarcoat our words, but most of the time, people listening to us, they know exactly what we are trying to say. So, yeah, there are words of rebuke. But in other words, if you are going to rebuke, it has to be for the sake of bringing more light, not with the sake of making you feeling better. That's always a bad motivator to rebuke somebody. Priscilla, what do you say here? Okay, so we are going to restream this same class tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. If you missed part of this class, you can catch the stream at 8 p.m. So always 8 p.m. Central Time, same day that we had Torah Lechaim at noon, you can watch the recording. So that's yeah. And again, I forgot to mention, if you are new, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do hit the subscribe button. And if you're subscribing, remember to hit the bell so you will be notified every time we go live or every time we upload something to our channels. Right? So, with that in mind, I want to leave behind now for a minute the concept of the olive oil and the fuel and the lights. And I want to talk a little bit about the clothing of the priests that they are mentioned in this parsha. Lots of details. You can go and read it, but I want to concentrate on one single thing that I found it fascinating. Just because we started this class talking a little bit about mysticism and Kabbalah, so I wanted to bring the most mystical and esoteric part of the clothing of the high priest. You know what I'm talking about? I will give you a second. What is the most mystical and esoteric part of the clothing of the priest? If you know it, type it in the chat. Meanwhile, I'm going to read here the comment of Reuven. He said, the outlook of viewing things as happening for us rather than to us is extremely helpful, especially during times in which we are being crushed or squeezed, something ultimately for our own good. Well, hopefully we can see it. Yeah, hopefully we can appreciate it that way. Karen Farkas, the breastplate. Holly, the ephod. Yeah. Well, you're close. You're both closed. The most esoteric part of the clothing of the high priest was the Urim and the Tumim. Who knows what those are? Urim Vetumim. You know what I'm talking about? Well, difficult to imagine what it was because we don't know. We truly don't know. And I'm going to present to you different opinions of different rabbis that they believe that they were different things. But let's start with the verse where the Urim and the Tumim are presented. It goes like this. In Exodus 28:30, it says, you, remember, the name of Moses is not here, it's all you. You are to put the Urim and the Tumim in the breastplate for judging. So yeah, the breastplate, it was there, and it was fine. It had all the stones for different tribes. Beautiful. But that was not the esoteric part. The esoteric part were the Urim and the Tumim that they have to be put on the breastplate. And it says, for judging. Okay? They will be over Aaron's heart when he goes into the presence of Adonai. Thus, Aaron will always have the means for making decisions for the people of Israel over his heart when he is in the presence of Adonai. Whoa. What are we talking about here? Why do we need the Urim and the Tumim? And then the other question is, how do we even use it? Right? But it seems to imply in this verse that for the sole fact that Aaron will have that Urim and Tumim as part of the breastplate, it will allow Aaron to know God's will, and it will help Aaron to make decisions. Well, that sounds like an oracle to me. Am I right? Does it sound like an oracle to you as well? What do you understand from this verse? Let me know in the chat. Jerome Fomin, you say, sounds like a traffic light. Green go, red stop. Okay, so you imply that there are some colors mixed there. But you see, it says Urim and Tumim, but nowhere it says that they are stones. Nowhere it says that they are metal. Nowhere it says what kind of material it was. And that makes it even more difficult for us to try to understand what were the Urim and the Tumim. So let me present to you, before we run out of time, some of the comments of different rabbis giving their opinions of what the Urim and the Tumim were. Let's start with Rashi. Rashi is usually a good place to start when you try to understand Torah. And Rashi says, the Urim and the Tumim, and he called it the illuminator and the verifier, which makes sense because Urim comes from the words or. Urim means lights, right? So that's why the Urim is translated as illuminator. And the Tumim is the verifier. We'll see in a minute how it works. Oh, Karen Farkas, you said maybe it's like a parchment in the mezuzah. Close. One of the rabbis, I believe, thinks like you, but just stay put and you will see. You will see that some people have that opinion, that there was a parchment. But Rashi says, the Urim and Tumim were the illuminator and the verifier, and was an inscription of the name of God. Okay? Inserted in the folds of the breastplate, it caused the letters inscribed on its stones to light up in response to queries posed by the community leaders. As it is written, Joshua shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall ask counsel for him after the judgment of the Urim before God. For this word shall they go out, by this word shall they come in, both he and all the children of Israel with him. This is why it was called the breastplate of judgment, since it decided and determined things for the people. So we don't really understand how it works, but according to Rashi, with something inserted inside the plate, they will make the different stones inserted there. Remember, there were 12 stones representing the 12 tribes, that they will come different colors, and based of that, the high priest will be trained into understanding that pattern of colors or whatever it was, and based on that, the priest will tell the leaders of Israel what to do on behalf of God. Yeah, it's an oracle. It's an oracle. You go, Joshua wanted to know what to do. Hey, should I go to war against this nation? Let's go ask the priest. Hey, Mr. Priest, should I go to work should I go to war against this nation? And the priest will say, I had to ask God, and God is going to communicate to me the decision based on what happened with the Urim and Tumim. Wonderful. Okay? But now we have the Rashbam, another rabbi. Oh, I don't like this. You see, I put it. This is my favorite font. It says, the function of the Urim and Tumim was somewhat similar to that of oracles, here you go, employed by the priest of idolatrous cults. If those had any value at all, and we may assume that at least their worshippers had concluded that they did, how much more influential would this Urim Vetumim in the sacred garments of the high priest be in order to elicit answers to questions posed to God, seeing that the means employed were holy and sanctioned by God himself? Very interesting, because he seems to imply that, hey, you know what? Maybe the oracles used by these pagans, maybe they work. But we have the best oracle of all, which it was going to be used only for holy purposes, and they are called the Urim and the Tumim, and they were going to represent the will of God, and we will know what to do. Very interesting. Now let's get a little bit more esoteric here. Where were the Urim and Tumim coming from? Because the rabbis noticed that there are no instructions in the Torah to actually make them. Like any of the things that they were built for the clothing or the tabernacle or the ark. There were very detailed instructions of how to make them, of what kind of stone, what kind of material. Some would be gold, wood, silver, or different materials. Not for the Urim or Tumim. We have no details. So how do we know how to make them? So there is a rabbi who said maybe they were not made. They were not man-made. What? Well, let's see what he says. Rabbi Behaya ben Asher ibn Halawa. He said, the Torah introduces both the Urim and the Tumim with the letter Hey in front. So basically the Torah said, Haurim. The Urim and the Tumim, right? It's that he's trying to understand the grammar here, this rabbi. So the Torah introduces both the Urim and the Tumim with the letter Hey in front, as if we were dealing with known phenomena, whereas in fact they have never been mentioned before. So basically what he's saying is when the Torah presents things like that, is something that everybody knew, so there is no need to explain what they were, because everybody knew that. Makes sense, actually, if everybody knew what it was, at least in that generation. So they had never been mentioned as being either part of furnishing of the tabernacle or have been part of the priestly vestments. Seeing that later on, when the various furnishing and vestments are being described as having been made, we never read of he made the Urim and the Tumim. He, it means that the artisans, right? It is clear that they were not something fashioned by craftsmen. They were something fashioned directly by celestial input. This is the reason they were introduced as a known quantity, something which has been in existence already. So in other words, what this rabbi is saying as the Urim and the Tumim were something like Moses' staff. Remember? The staff, the stick that Moses was carrying everywhere with him? Everybody knew about it. So there was no need to describe it. Everybody knew that it has some magical thing, but it was common knowledge. So it's almost like this Urim and the Tumim always existed. And people knew what they were, even though they are not described in the Torah. But we trust that everybody knew. That's why there is no description in the Torah, and everybody knew that they came from God. It's almost that they were specifically created by the time of God creating the world. God already created this Urim and this Tumim. And who knew? Who knows? Maybe they belonged to another culture and finally it made its way into the Jewish people, so now they could use it. Who knows? But this is what this rabbi is implying, that the Urim and the Tumim are supernatural and they were not made by artisans. How they use it here, it is a different word. What is the word he's using here? Craftsmen. Okay? Coming directly from God. But, and this is our last text for today, Karen Farkas, here's the rabbi who agrees with you. This is Abraham ibn Ezra. He says, the Urim and the Tumim were a piece of parchment on which the holy name of God had been written, and which Moses inserted between the folds of the cloth supporting the Hoshen. The proof of all this is that we do not find a single mention in the Torah of the Urim and Tumim as being one or two of the components of either the tabernacle or the vestments of the priest being constructed by any of the artisans who fashion all the other items. So it's interesting. Hello, Gloria. Welcome. This is interesting because what is implied here is that the fact that the Torah doesn't mention it, it means that it's not something sophisticated. It's not something that it has to be made by experts. But it also means that it's not something that it was supernaturally made. Because even Ezra probably thought that if it would be something supernaturally made, the Torah will somehow mention it. Let's imply it. but nothing. So he said, so why are we overthinking this? He would say the Urim and the Tumim were a piece of parchment. That, the Torah doesn't spend much time talking about it, but it's nothing to talk about it. It's a piece of parchment where Moses would write the name of God, and that's it. So these are all the theories that I could find about the Urim and the Tumim. And I thought that they were fascinating. Fascinating. Anyway, right? Fascinating things. The Urim and the Tumim as a source of oracle. Because even if it was just something that Moses wrote in a piece of parchment, nevertheless, it was going to be used to make decisions. And that, to me, is fascinating. Right? The Torah implies that perhaps there is a way to know God's will, in the sense that we can ask God and we have a physical way to know God's answers. At least the possibility is implied here in the Torah. But maybe we should talk about that in another class. For now, I would like to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining me for this class. Remember, if you like the class, hit that thumbs up. And remember that this class is going to be restreamed tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. For those of you who missed the beginning, don't worry. Wait, 8 p.m. is going to be restreamed. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. God willing, next Thursday, again at noon Central Time, we have a date to study next week's Parsha and to somehow bring more light to our lives by studying Torah, by studying words of wisdom from the rabbis, so we can always improve our lives and we can also be a source of light to other people. Thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. I hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.